And with me now from Ottawa is Bob Rae, who has announced he is stepping down as a Liberal MP. Mr. Rae, big day for you. How difficult a decision was this, and how are you feeling about it now that it's all done?
Well, it was very tough. It took me a long time to finally come to grips with having to leave, and it's been an emotional day, but it's also been a good one. I mean, I've had a lot of very positive reaction from people, which I find gratifying, and the slingshots from the predictable quarters that I'm not surprised to get. So I feel better. I guess I'd say I feel better now than I did at the beginning of the day. I was a little emotional at the beginning of the day, but I'm feeling good now.
Why now, when the Liberals seem to have momentum? Why not stick with it until the next election?
Well, I mean, you go through the next election, and then you're into, either you win or you lose. And I don't think you can say, vote for me and I'll quit. I think you have to kind of see things through. And in this case, I had a very compelling offer, really, from the First Nations communities in Northern Ontario to do some work for them. I'm being approached by some other First Nations across the country, and I just said, look, if I'm going to do this work, I can't do it and stay on as an MP. I'm going to have to make a choice. And so I've decided to do that work and to continue to work on issues that I find interesting and speak out, perhaps do a little writing, a little bit of teaching, and whatever. We'll see what happens. I don't have any big plans. I'm just sort of waiting to see what happens.
Well, I heard you talk a little bit about that, your next endeavor earlier today, and you got quite emotional, it seemed, when you talked about going for that boat ride with a man and his daughter. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, Eleanor is a little girl who's a First Nations kid from the community called Nibinamik, which is right in the heart of the province of Ontario, the very sort of far north of Thunder Bay. And my daughter's name is Eleanor. Our youngest is Eleanor. And I thought to myself, this kid is, how do we make sure that she's got some chances and some opportunities and some things she can do? And I think when you look at the way people are living in a lot of remote communities, you got to ask yourself some pretty basic questions about what are you going to do to make this a better place. And I've got my health. I've got a lot of experience. I hope I can put some of that to good use and to good help in circumstances that I think we as Canadians have got some work to do.
You were first elected in 1978. You've had a roller coaster of a ride in politics over the years, victories, defeats as both a Liberal and a New Democrat. Yep. Any regrets? Anything you wish you'd done differently?
Oh no, not in that sense. I mean, I would like to have I would like to become leader a little earlier than I did in other conventions, but that didn't happen. When I look back on my time in Ontario, I kind of feel that there perhaps were some things I could have done a little better, a little differently, that might have given me a stronger political base than I ended up in the election in '95. We had to make some very tough decisions in the recession. I was probably not as good a listener as I hope I am today. Didn't roll with quite as many punches as you need to, but these are things you learn along the way. I've never regretted a minute of public service, and I think a lot of us who've been in public life will say that for all of the brickbats and for all of the tough circumstances, public life is worth it. Politics is worth it, and I continue to encourage people to embrace it and to try to do it a little differently than perhaps some people have done before.
Well, that is a positive message. It's hard to see that sometimes, looking in on political life. Can you reflect a little for us on how things have changed over the years, the level of political discourse in Ottawa, the hyper-partisan nature of Parliament right now, the attacks that we seem to see all the time? Is the cut and thrust of politics tougher now than it used to be?
I don't think it's tougher. I think it's a lot less spontaneous. I think it's a lot less real. I think it's a lot more synthetic, manufactured, organized. I mean, what we're seeing now is highly organized, it's highly scripted, and I think that's what people don't like about what they see. But it's certainly it's intended to suppress voters. It's intended to increase cynicism. It's intended to create the reaction such as yours that say, Why would anybody go into this? Because generally speaking, that encourages and benefits more conservative, more right-wing parties, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it as it's a deliberate tactic, and it's only if Canadians say we don't like this tactic, we don't want this tactic, we don't want it to go forward. It's only when we see that I think we're going to perhaps begin to change the dialogue, perhaps change the narrative a bit more than we've been able to do. But right now, it really is pretty scripted and pretty scary. I find. I mean, I can see it happening, but it's not a pretty picture.
I spoke with you on the last federal election night, and I asked you back then about whether it was time to start working on uniting the left. And as I recall, you danced around the answer a little bit. But as a man who's worked with the Liberals and with the NDP, will there ever come a time to get into one big tent and work together?
I still think, I'm not really dancing, I'm just giving you my estimate. I still think it's too early for that to happen, if it ever happens. I think both parties are going to run full slates of candidates in the next election. I think they're going to insist that people choose between either one. I don't think there's any predicting as to how politics can change or evolve after that, or depending on what happens in the election and so on. The reality is, having been in both the New Democrats and the Liberals, they are very different parties, and at the same time, they have some important things in common. They have important differences, and they have important things in common. And I think it will only be, I don't think any one of us can predict exactly how that's all going to turn out. I think the thing that we all need to reflect on, though, is that I think most Canadians don't want to see a more conservative, a more right-wing government get another majority mandate. I think that's a very strong sentiment among a lot of Canadians, 65, 70, 75% of Canadians even. So I think that's something that we need to figure out a way to make sure that that's reflected in the results. So
you've left politics before and come back. Never say never, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm 64. I say that very openly. My hair is white. My weight is a little more than it should be. I've got to think about all those things. But I am a public guy. I've enjoyed public life very much. You never know what's going to happen. One door closes, another door opens. We'll just have to see what happens.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us, and best of luck in your next endeavor. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Donna. Good talking to you.
Take care.